All right, guys. Happy Thursday. Happy Thursday. Happy Thursday. Welcome to our Purchase Ready Labs live training. As we continue with our discussion, seller listing mastery, be rebuilding a repeatable model. Let's mute these phones. For seller representation is our discussion. We have a lot of new faces in the room, but there is actually there's of course a lot of familiar faces and a lot of new faces. Yes, there's a handout. We'll have the handout link up just shortly. But for those who I have not had a chance to meet before, good afternoon at this point because it is after 12 o'clock. Happy Thursday and welcome to the Purchase Ready Lab training room. This is our weekly meetup spot for all things real estate, Florida real estate sales, marketing, contract to close, title and escrow, all the things, right? My name is Racole Jackson. I'm a South Florida real estate and finance attorney. A little bit about me personally. I am originally from Florida, Miami specifically. Born and bred. I attended the University of Florida for undergrad. Go Gators. I did go out to California for law school, where I got my law degree from Santa Clara University School of Law, where I was the founder of the Real Estate Law Society. I've always loved all things real estate. Came back home to Miami and got my LLM in real property development from the University of Miami School of Law. So, of course, again, I guess secondarily, go Canes, right? Because I am from Miami. I am a licensed realtor in Florida and Georgia, and a licensed mortgage loan officer in Florida and Georgia. And so, again, we come in this room every Thursday to just talk all things real estate. Concerning our transactions. We are super excited that we have officially launched and continuing to launch our purchase ready ecosystem. That includes all of the different services that are available to our team as well as our consumers under the purchase ready umbrella. That includes, of course, the Academy, which is our teaching umbrella, our teaching line, purchase ready homes, which is the sales line, purchase ready lending, which is obviously our mortgage and financing line, and then purchase ready title and escrow, which is how most of you met me, title and closing. But we have expanded, we are growing, and we are super excited about offering those services to realtors and their customers. Now, the Purchase Ready Academy. We are you for those of you that have been with me for a while, you know that I am a huge proponent of learning. Learn more to earn more. Period. Learn more to earn more. If you ever wanted to increase your bottom line, increase the amount of information that you not only intake but implement. I promise you. Attorneys don't make promises and they don't give absolutes, but I can absolutely tell you that if you learn more, you will earn more. And so the whole mission behind Purchase Ready Academy is to provide realtors with one guided path from learning to closing. One guided path. One guided path. Because we are a company that offers 360 degrees of services, we also offer the ability to teach a realtor how to go, again, one guided path from learning the business to closing transactions in the business, right? So, how to partner with us? Again, we provide the same services to you that we provide to your clients: title, lending, of course, coaching. For those of you who have not had a chance to work with us before, we welcome the opportunity to work with you. We have been a ways this month, this quarter, on this seller listing mastery content, and we have quite a ways to go. But super excited about today's discussion. Today's discussion is on the pricing strategy and preparing the CMA, discussing the seller net sheet. I'm going super fast through the intro because I want to get right to the main event. For those of you that asked, you know how we do. Here's the link to the handout. Go ahead and grab the handout so that we can get into today's discussion. All right, labhandout.com. Today's discussion: Florida Realtor pricing strategy, how to prepare a comparative market analysis like a market expert. So this is our discussion for today. Now, our presenter for today, or our expert for today, is none other than Nick Jackson. So On the screen is it is literally not even the tip of the iceberg of Nick's his credentials, his experience. To be perfectly honest with you, I literally learn more and more and more with every transaction that we have the opportunity to partner on. But by way of a very brief introduction, many of you know Nick either through personal interactions with him over the years as a realtor. Some of you have met Nick recently by virtue of him making himself available to the academy during the office hours each morning at 10:30 a.m. Most recently, where he's supporting the realtors in their sharpening their skills around listing appointments and most recently pricing strategy. But for those of you who have not met Nick Jackson before, just a little bit about him. Nick is a broker, currently serving as not just a broker but also a developer, also a as I almost say also. Many of you know that Nick is an investor himself. Many properties he will fix and flip, others fix and hold. Those of you who know that Nick has a significant portfolio of properties that he uh, is managing, short-term rentals, again, those that are on the market as fix and flips. But about his professional experience, Nick started off with a degree in architecture, went on professionally, started off as an architect, went on to work with national banks as an appraiser after he got his appraisals license from the Appraisal Institute. And started off in California. Now, like many of us, once he moved into sales, some of us foolishly allow some of those licenses to to sit to the wayside. But of course, the experience did not go away. But with that experience, it gave Nick the opportunity to appraise and value properties nationally. Of course, our discussion today is focused on Florida, but he has had the ability to not only appraise value but also list properties nationally. Nick has literally sold thousands of properties. Some of you probably know that Nick has been listed on the Wall Street Journal's top producing agents. He's consistently been a top producing broker when his primary practice was in the brokerage space. He has continuously been called on by banks to value some of their most difficult properties, as well as when it was time to liquidate their assets, called on him to list literally hundreds of properties per month at a time. And so who else would be a person to lead us in this conversation about how to confidently assess the value of a property to come up with its market value, and not only that, how to have the discussion to present your findings, right? So without further ado, if y'all can light up the chat a little bit, give him a couple of a round of applause for Nick Jackson. I'm gonna tell you guys, here's a funny thing. When I first met Nick, and currently still we're gonna work on this. Most people never they saw his name all over listings, but they never saw his face. And so someone said, "You are a real person." One guy said, "I thought you were the Loch Ness monster." And so it was so funny. Like you're a name that we've always heard about, but we've never seen you. And so with that being said, it is not lost on me what it takes to pull him out of a property and in front of this computer screen to have this conversation. So today, the way we are going to um, have this conversation, Nick, if you want to come off mute and add a little bit before we go into our discussion, feel free.
Thank you, Racole, for the introduction. Much appreciated. Um, uh, Thank you for everyone that gave me the round of applause there. Real estate's supposed to be fun, and I've obviously touched on many sides of real estate. And what does it always come down to with your clients? Value, value, value. What's your value? What's the property value? And that's always been the argument and the lead-in discussion to either getting a listing up and running or figuring out how to price your property. So that's why we're leading into this particular discussion is with pricing strategy and how to complete and accurately value a property. Real estate's supposed to be fun. It is a sales job, but ultimately it's the technical side of it. from my background on valuing properties for the banks, dealing with the bank managers, arguing about properties, I outsourced and listed properties throughout the country. I could look at a property in Hawaii and tell the appraiser he's wrong and the realtor he's right, or tell the realtor they're wrong and the appraiser they're right. I could tell who was trying to steal the property for their mama as opposed to listing the property at a fair market value. So we've been through a lot of changes in real estate over the years, but ultimately the value is still the most important factor in listing a property. So I want to thank you. We're going to lead in. Racole, if you want to get the slides going so we can get going with discussing. But the main thing is you want to bring your sales skills to the table, but ultimately you want to not be the average agent. You want to be the agent who knows your market and knows your pricing strategy so that you're going to stand out among other people. Top agents, obviously, Florida Realtor pricing strategy and how to prepare a comparative market analysis is probably the weakest link on most realtors. They might be the best dressed salesperson, the most talkative and friendly person with their client, but ultimately you have to go in with the precision of an appraiser to be a top tier agent. Top tier agents win by not just coming up with a price, but knowing their inventory and proving that they're true experts. And the goal that we're going to go over of this CMA is basically to provide concrete data and evidence and remove the sellers and your personal emotions from the pricing process. And we'll go over pricing strategies in detail. And I know some of you have been on the 1030 lab on how we go about pricing specific properties. So appraisers do not give prices on the spot. If you ever have an appraiser come out to your house, whether you're hiring them or the bank is hiring them for a refi, agents, they don't give you the price. All right, what did you come up with after looking at my property? Agents should also research first and then present ranges later, and as opposed to a specific price. Um, we have two types of agents. You basically, whether you're new or you've been in the business 20 plus years, 30 plus years, whatever it is, you don't want to be an amateur agent. You can be an amateur agent with 20 years of experience. Guesses are not the accurate way based on your gut feeling. And as you know, when you go for listing appointments, most people, it's their gut feeling. I saw a property on Zillow. I think mine's worth 100,000 more than that. Um, the amateur relies heavily on emotional bias. They give immediate locked in numbers at their first appointment. So basically, you're going to have two or three people maybe come behind you with other numbers that are going to confuse the client. The master detective, as we'll refer the agent, approaches every valuation with pure logic, gathers concrete evidence before visiting the property. You really have to go armed. It's like a soldier going in for battle. You're gathering everything. You're going armed to the teeth. Establishes a well-researched price range prior to stepping foot in the house. Great listing agents, you're not guessing pricing. You're building a case. It's like you're going to court, put your shoes on as an expert. You're basically putting your shoes on, going to give the evidence at your court hearing. You're looking at a home as a salesperson if you're an average agent. If you're an expert, you're looking through the lens of an appraiser, technical side of it. If you're going in as an average agent, you're leading with your emotions. If you're an expert, you're leading with the logic, the other side of your brain. We all have multiple sides to our brain. I know some of us have split personalities. So giving a singular price on the spot is not being an expert. Market experts returning with a carefully researched price range.
Right. Yeah. So one of the things that I wanted to make sure that we were clear on, and you guys know that I am they say right brain, left brain type person. I'm systematic. So one of the things that I always look at when we are when and this is just as a general matter in your business, one thing I always remind you guys, if it's something that you're going to do repeatedly, you want to build a system around it. If it's something, even for you, even if it's not something that you're going to delegate, but it's something that you personally that you're going to do repeatedly, build a system around it, like a blueprint, a roadmap, and it'll become easier for you to execute. Number one, especially for newer agents. So one of the questions that we often get is newer agents are like, I have no clue how to do this. And so the conversation today with Nick is hopefully going to give you some comfort around high level. Of course, today we don't have the opportunity to sit in the MLS. We did that earlier, right? That's a different room. That's a different time period. But it's going to give you at least a high level framework of what the final product should look like when you are pricing a property, right? To go into a listing appointment. So the first step is, of course, you want to gather public information. You want to gather the information from the public records, such as who is the owner. You're going to look at the square footage of the property. You're going to look at the price that the property sold for. Second phase, and I'm going to go high level as I go over these slides, and then Nick is going to add his even more depth explanation of it. The second phase of your CMA process is you're going to, and this is something that he's very big on. See, one of the things that I'm going to be very transparent with you guys about is that I get a chance to watch him work and see how he comes up with his listing presentations. And so one of the things that he always points out is to use the what do you call it, the polygram. Don't just do a 1 mile radius. Don't just say, oh, a 1 mile radius, but you need to draw your radius because every just be 1 mile, a property next door could just be completely different. These are townhomes in this community. That next community is all estate homes. So if you did a 1 mile radius, your comps are going to be completely off, right? So that takes us into the third phase that even when you do draw your own map, you're going to need to filter through those comps so that you can get down to the few that are actually comparables for you based upon either square footage, based upon bed and bath mix, based upon age, based upon amenities, upgrades, so on and so forth. And then lastly, we're going to talk about building that final report that you're going to present to the sellers at your listing appointment. Nick, you want to add anything on that?
One of the things that you're leading in with public records, why does public records matter? They just put it in their file, tuck it in the back. That's one of your most important things to lead in with public records. You're basically looking at all the information to make sure it's accurate. The person may have added 1,000 square feet. Your numbers are not accurate. The person, what did they purchase it for? Their motivation to sell, are they upside down? You really want to carefully look. They're saying it's their property. Oops, it's listed in their mother's name or it's listed in their brother's name. So your public records is your really important to look at before you go out to the property so you know what you're running into and you're not blindsided. So um, you're basically, I know we're going into this slide after we've looked at our public records, we know where we're looking for comps. If you're doing the radius search, and also we're going to talk about automated valuation models as we move into it, but you need to know your market. You need to know your boundaries. Most people, what they teach you in real estate schools, search everything within a mile. That's what the appraiser does. That's how you're going to value your property. But be an expert, look at your boundaries. You can use the map search function in all the MLS systems that are available. You can do a radius, you can do a square, you can look lock the specific boundaries in the neighborhood. As you'll see in the slide on the right, you draw your boundaries directly around the neighborhood or the neighboring competing neighborhoods. So don't just limit yourself to that immediate neighborhood or that subdivision. Whether you're in Broward or Dade or Palm Beach County, as you know, many subdivisions have competing subdivisions. So don't necessarily go a mile out. You've got to know, all right, where do I have similar homes? Where are similar price points? Because that's how you're going to value. It's called targeted, custom boundaries. So when you're mapping the radius as it shows here in the slide, You don't typically cross major streets or highways for the neighborhood. Obviously, if you're you're in Palm Beach County, or if you're in Broward, you can go on one side of 95 and go on the next side of 95, totally different values. You can cross over from Miami Gardens, into Broward, in 2 minutes. So you have to be careful and know your boundaries. And by looking at a map, even those of you who are new, how do I determine my boundaries? Look at a map, and it usually has the sections when you're doing before you even start drawing your boundaries. Automated valuation models don't always separate the boundaries. And this is the case, especially when you don't have a lot of comparables to compare. Those of you who do condos, don't stay closed-minded in that one building. There are many buildings usually that are competing to that. So basically, that's your targeted approach. Um, Here we're using basically what we call a filter. If you look at it like a champagne glass, you start out wide, actives, pending, sold in the last 6 months, you know, is what your typical historic value is going to give. But then you start to narrow it down. You match specifics. You're matching style, or you're matching exact room count, or you're matching square footage. And later on, we'll go into that as well. You start filtering, and basically you're trying to narrow it down. If you have too many comps and you're saying, oh my gosh, I have 150, properties in the area, that's when you start gradually narrowing down. So, all right, you eliminate things. You need properties that are closer in size. So, all right, if you've got a 2,000 square foot property, go one within 20%. So then you're at 2,400, and maybe as low as 1,600 square feet. Those can be competing. So your square footage and room count. I always say in MLS, be careful also doing room count, like bedrooms and bath. What if the realtor didn't enter the accurate number of bedrooms? A lot of realtors, when they list properties and you're pulling comps, they don't enter the accurate number of bathrooms or bedrooms. So you might miss out on that comp. Don't get too specific, but narrow it with your filter. Isolate exactly 3 to 4 relevant comps. And when we say relevant comps, you've got 3 to 5 sales and 3 to 5 listings. You don't want to have 10, especially if you're going to have this discussion with the customer. You're going in there armed with a narrow data. As you know, people are not patient who know nothing about what you're trying to tell them. They don't know what you're explaining. They just want to get down to the specifics. So from those hundreds of listings, you're basically pulling actives to see exactly what your competition is and what buyers are currently evaluating. Very important. And I know a lot of sellers say, hey, this one sold for that. No, it didn't sell. It's listed for that price. It's listed for 450, and your seller's telling you that it sold last week for, 450. Wait a minute. Let's look at that in detail. So your sellers have a lot of access to AI and information, but that information is only as good as the user. Just like anyone can use ChatGPT, but only the end product of what you give it is the data that you're going to get out of it. So we have that 20% square footage guideline. And in some areas, if you're doing luxury, especially if you're in the multi-million dollar price point, you're going to have to expand that range. You could have a 5,000 square foot property competing against a 7,000 square foot property, and that's going to exceed your 20% range. So the more complex the property, the more you might have to expand your parameters, especially if there's no data. So let's move on to the next slide here. And Racole, if you want to lead into that one. If not, I'll continue on that. Go ahead, Racole.
Was just going to, this was just more explanation around your conversation about eliminating outliers. If you want to go ahead and continue with that.
When you eliminate, one off, we went over an example this morning with one of the agents who was going to list a property, and they had one that was really low, and you had a couple that are really high. So you want to eliminate those outliers and look at the photos. Don't just pull comps and, all right, I got the comps. Look at the detail of that comps. And preparing for a listing and preparing for a valuer, it's a time. It's not something you do while you've got the kids pulling at you, you've got people discussing. You need to focus. And you will, as you do more of it, you'll become better. and you'll learn. Even if you've been doing this for 20 years, you start looking at the photos, there's something that's different on that property. Look at the ones that have been completely rehabbed, the overpriced ones that are sitting on the market over 34 days. That's not a great comp. It's a comp, but if it's been on the market over 30 days, why are you using that comp? If it's on the market in 90 days and there's been no price reductions, you've got to start looking at days on the market. Yeah, and when you're looking at your sales, you want to look at the ratios. You can tell your sellers, look, that yeah, they started out at 500,000, but it ended up selling for 400. So someone, either it was the seller's price that the realtor followed or the realtor overpriced it. And that's the worst thing you have to do, is keep backpedaling because you didn't accurately price your property. You point, the list price versus your sold price. When you've got over 90%, something was wrong. It points to severity of the condition issues that were discovered during inspections and it backpedaled after inspections, or poor negotiating agents. I know we're not going to get into that today, but you can use that with FISBOs as well. A strategy like, hey, look, that one did not sell at the right price because it was not sold with someone who's an expert like me. And you go in with, you're the expert, you're analyzing a lot of data before you even got to that appointment to list the property. Unusually low sale price. Check the photos, indicates a gut rehab, inferior issues on the property, locational issue, power lines, backing to another property, a two-story looking down, and no one wanted to be in the glass house with other neighbors looking inside the house. So there are always factors on some comps that had a percentage that's over 90% list to sold price. And for those of you who don't know what that means, a technical term, if you list your property at 100,000 and it sells at 400,000, you basically had a variation of over 20%. So that would be 80% the value is what it ended up selling at. And you don't want to be that realtor that's listing properties and selling them at 80% of your initial list price. So let's move on to the next slide.
So I have a question for you, Nick, and it's on this point. Mentioning listing a property at a price, only selling it at 80% of the price. I've watched you numerous times challenge an appraiser's value. Talk to us about how you determined that it was necessary to um, challenge an appraiser's value. Now, of course, help us feel confident in this, because many people are looking at the backdrop and say, well, Nick, you are an appraiser, like you appraised for years, you are a licensed appraiser. So how does a realtor who does not have the confidence of having being licensed as an appraiser look at an appraiser's report and determine, I need to challenge this? And then if they do decide that they need to challenge it, what is their best method of challenging it? And then of course, you recently had the experience with the property that you challenged an appraiser and won. Can you give some explanation on that, please?
Well, there are two things on an appraisal that we're going to use. There are three things that we're going to use an appraiser for, and in another class on how to adjust your value and who do you bring in once your value is not accurate. You use appraisers for what? Three different things. You use the appraiser once you got the property under contract. The bank is going to send an appraiser out to make sure your value that they're buying it for is accurate. If the seller's going to refi the property, they also typically have banks involved and there's an appraiser. And then the third way an appraiser is used is if you have a seller and you guys aren't on the same page, you want to engage an appraiser if it's feasibly and economically you're able to challenge the seller's thought process and the value that they listed it at 5 million, you think it's worth 4.5 or 4 million, and you engage an appraiser to confirm your numbers. And then the fourth issue that we have with appraisers, and everyone hates appraisers when the deal is killed, right? You can't stand that appraiser. He doesn't know what he's talking about. He came from Jupiter to value my property in Pembroke Pines, or he came from Miami to do my Wellington and he killed the deal because he doesn't know the market. It's not very difficult for an appraiser to quickly learn the market, but you're supposed to be the expert. So challenge an appraiser is not just, all right, I'm going to give them three comps that are better. You have to build a whole scenario. And that's a whole nother class as well on how to challenge an appraisal rebuttal. But it's not a difficult thing to do if you know your market. That property had a custom pool. It wasn't just on a pond, it was on a wide lake view. The lot was a premium lot, is one of the reasons that it's selling above the comps. And there's no reason to use a comp that's in the same subdivision that's also on a lake, but the lake view is 10 feet and the neighbor miss miss neighbor across the street can wave and you can have a conversation across that narrow point of the lake, or it's actually a canal. Appraisers don't have time to get into full detail. Their job is to get the appraisal out. They're under the gun and they have to get it out in a time frame. So if you're confident with your value, don't just let the buyer's agent kill your deal, or if you represent the buyer's agent, don't just stop at it. But battling an appraiser, you have to have data. You have to have your all your key points and issues to bring up, and then the bank will review that. So challenging an appraisal is not an easy, it's a battle if you're gonna undertake it. More than likely, I'd say 30% of the time you're wrong, or sorry, there 30% of the time you're wrong and 70% of the time the appraiser's right. But if you're confident in your value, go ahead and make that battle to challenge the appraiser. You have something you wanted to say, Racole, on that?
Your math, you just said the agent was 100% of the time wrong. You said 30% of the time the agent is wrong, 70% of the time the appraiser is right. So the agent in that math is 100% of the time wrong. So that was funny. Um, did you want to add anything else about the appraisal situation? Um,
No, an appraisal is an important part to the equation, and the appraiser doesn't use maybe one day in the future, everything will be AI and automated valuation models. But be careful, automated valuation models are not accurate. They're used for HELOC loans, home equity, or for low risk loans. But ultimately, when you're going to value a property as a new agent, I've had people say, "Oh, okay, here's the value. I came up with it. How'd you come up with the value? Oh, I put it in." The, all of us have automated valuation models. We can plug the numbers into, whatever CMA program you use, Toolkit, CMA, or your own proprietary. Everybody uses different CMA programs to come up with values. It's a good guideline, but remember, you can adjust these values. You don't have to just stick with the value that the automated value gives you. MLS has programs to give you a value as well. But when you have unique properties, and most of the properties in Florida vary, unless you're selling all the townhomes in the development of 2 bedrooms and 3 bedrooms, or it's in a condo building and everything's the same. But even the condo we looked at this morning, there's a difference. Some have a nice green or golf course view, some have a view of the right across the next building. Some are on the ground floor, some are on the fourth floor, and there can be a difference in valuation going up each floor. And if you've got a lake view, so be careful of your confidence. As it says here, your confidence score rises as you know how to use each of the data models. Write down, your range, but don't key in on algorithms that give you a specific price. And we'll go into that later on in a couple of slides. If you're an expert and you key in on a number, your seller is going to tear you apart an exact number. Really, he's going to rip you a new one. So let's move on to the next slide here.
so there's a quick question in the chat. Is it possible to challenge an appraisal and not miss the closing date? It is possible to challenge an appraisal and not miss the closing date. It's all about timing, right? A challenge, an appraisal challenge, I would say in my experience, it does take you about at least a week. And if it's a busy time, it could take longer. So just take that into consideration, right? So if you get the appraisal back early enough in the closing process, consider it taking about a week to get that process completed, that challenge process completed, will you now make your closing date? It's possible. So the short answer is yes, it is possible. All right. Um, go ahead. Go ahead.
I'm going to piggyback on that appraisal issue. Whether you're a listing agent or you're a buyer's agent, it benefits you as a listing agent if you get a contract that comes in. On all the contracts that I put in, I don't care, appraisal will be completed within 15 days, you know, of execution of the contract. That prevents you, the old strategy, waiting till the last minute, the loan commitment. Also look at the loan commitment date, 30 days, and they wait till the 30th day or the 20th day for the appraisal to come in. If you put everybody on notice and remind the loan officers, hey, this appraisal is due in, so you don't run into that issue. And a lot of times the appraisers will dig their heels in. They do not want to change their value. They do not want to be proven wrong. But if you give enough data, they may hire a different appraiser to come out and give a different value. That appraiser digs their heels in. Certain lenders have criteria. If your rebuttal varies and you have specific data that you provide, they will allow for an additional appraisal. Or if it's a mortgage broker, he sometimes will shop it to a different lender. The only issue you have with this is with FHA. FHA, obviously, the value and the appraisal can stick with the property for 6 months. So you have to be careful on that. But most lenders will challenge the appraiser on an FHA appraisal if there's enough data, sufficient data, and mitigating circumstances. But go ahead, Racole.
So we have two questions in the chat. One is, for an appraisal challenge, do you need both buyer and seller on board, or can one party challenge the appraisal?
Here's the important part in that. The most important part in the appraisal challenge is to get the realtors on board. The realtors control the timelines. You can adjust, say, hey, we need a little more time, or we're going to challenge it. If you represent the seller and the deal's being killed, why would you not want to wait on the appraisal rebuttal to at least give it a chance, the lender, to be able to come up with a different value? If you represent the buyer, you want the listing agent to be on board with you. A good listing agent is going to help you because they want to sell. So if you're representing buyers, hey, and I'm the listing agent, hey, I'm going to help you. Let me provide you with some comps. I did that for a buyer's agent. I mean, we had multiple offers. I could have moved on to another offer, but this was a good, clean offer. And, what's the point in starting all over? And you tell your seller, hey, we're going to start all over fresh. We're already 20 days into it. We just need a little more time for the appraisal rebuttal to see if it works. If not, we can make a decision at that point. Do you want to start over with a new contract, or do you want to go with this value that the appraiser has given us, and we've gone with a rebuttal and not been successful? This way your seller knows that you're working for them. And the buyer, don't let them freak out that the property is not worth that price. It is worth it sometimes, or maybe it's not. It's in your benefit if the value is brought down, and the seller's agent will work with you. But as a listing agent, you have to explain this to your sellers that, hey, we tried this number. It's not agreeable. We can start out fresh and hope for another person. If it's a hot property, and they can't pay the difference in the price, then you may try again. But remember, time is money as well.
So we have one more question. What is a typical cost for using an appraiser? And I'm going to assume, I guess we can answer both, for if it's a appraisal for financing and then an appraisal for, I would say, listing or pre-listing diligence, Nick.
Okay. Appraisals, obviously, as everyone knows, you don't contact the appraiser directly if it's once you have the property under contract. The lender uses an appraisal management company, unless they have some mortgage direct lenders have their own appraisal network, and they draw from their appraisal network. But if or what was the question again? I was getting ready to go into
The one for if you're hiring an appraisal for like your pre-listing due diligence.
So the price of an appraisal can vary tremendously. If you're hiring it, like for a pre-listing appointment, or a listing appointment, and you and the seller are not on the same page as price, but they want to use you, or you've been on the market for over 30, 45, 90 days, whatever the case is, and you want to go back and convince the seller. If you hire the appraiser direct, for that, that's the only way you can hire an appraiser direct to do rebuttal with your seller to adjust your price point. And it's free anywhere from 300 to 450 when you hire their appraiser direct, and you can negotiate that fee because they know they're working for you, the realtor. They don't have to send this. It's not going to be reviewed by anyone. They can do a quick appraisal, a desktop, or do a quick drive by, or they'll come out, do a normal appraisal, but not charge the fee because no one else has taken a cut of an appraisal. When a lender hires an appraiser through an appraisal management company, the cost can be anywhere from 500 to 750 for single family residences or more for custom, because the appraisal management firm can take as much as 35 to 40% of that fee. The Mr. Appraisers, you think he's getting 750? No, he may only be getting 350, 400, just depends on what the negotiated rate is. So very important to know that when you hire them, you can typically negotiate, say, hey, I've got it ready. I've got comps to give you. I've got information to help you with this. What's your availability? I can make the property open anytime you're ready. That will help you on the price that you personally, you and the seller hire the appraiser to basically come up with a clean value. Hopefully that answers the question.
Just just one follow-up question on that point, Nick, because I know a lot of or some agents use an appraiser in their just as part of their listing process. They engage an appraiser by on every deal to provide market data. What are your thoughts on a realtor using appraiser across the board versus just engaging them when there is some distance between them and their seller on what the list price should be?
Yeah, mixed on that. It depends on as you get better with your skill on valuing a property. I wouldn't hire an appraiser on every single deal. Some are very straightforward. It's more for the appraiser, the issues you have with your seller on listing and your price is way off. If you're suggesting a price of 800 and the seller wants to list their property at 1.2 million, um, you can tell them I'll list it at 1.2, and you're wasting a lot of your time if you're confident your value is 800 to 850. And remember, never have an exact value. You should have a value range, and then you start at a price. And there's an art to listing at the price you want. So having an appraiser is an important part if you've got a valuation issue or you're not confident in the number and the seller's leaning towards you for a value. But also let the appraiser know we're trying to get a quick sale value. We're not trying to get a value to refinance the property, because then he'll come at the top end of the range. That's why I'm talking about a range. You have to know how to lead someone in, just like you have to lead your seller into listing the price a specific point in the range. But if you go, let's use car shopping, and there's that Porsche is selling between 100,000 and 150,000. You're going to want the $100,000 Porsche, not the $150,000 one. So same in a property. If you give someone a range of 450 to 500, I bet you 9 times out of 10 the seller's going to list it at 500 unless you've gone in and clearly explained it. So when you have a disparity in a range and your seller's not listening to you, then you would recommend engaging an appraiser so you both can be on the same page if you've got a combative seller.
Nice. So let's move into um, presenting the valuation. So we know that we should never go in with you should list your property at, 5,323,000, right? Let's talk about the presenting the price as a range. How do you discuss the range when you are preparing to when you're having a discussion with the seller about the valuation that you've come up with, and why do you use a range?
Using a range doesn't corner me into a specific spot, because if the seller, if you're going on listing appointments, let's say you don't actually have the listing yet and you're still competing and he's on the fence, or she's on the fence, you have five people or three people that are in their ears that have told them different numbers. One realtor told them 425, Zillow told them 450. The other realtor told them I can list it for 550. The other one's 600. So wait a minute, the seller gets confused. So you going in, giving them a narrow but concise range allows, okay, that sounds good. So what within that range? It allows to open up conversation to key in on a number within the range, but the range doesn't put you in a corner. It's like, are you going to stand in the corner or are you going to stand in the middle of the room? So when you stand in the corner, you're cornered in. You gave them that number. So now if you ever have to adjust the price, you can't because you're in the corner. You got knocked out. you know, you got not you were in the ring, you were boxing, and you gave them a specific number in the beginning. Obviously, you're going to list it at a specific number, but when you have the discussion on even on your CMA, you should put a range, and we'll talk about that range as well in the next slide. But here we're talking about a conservative price to move the property immediately. Some sellers don't want that. They say, I've got time. No, you don't have time. Market value target, which is your sweet spot within the range based on the 3 to 5 filtered comps, or you narrowed it down to 2 or 1 comp that's closer. The aggressive target, which is your last resort if you have to do that to get the listing, but prepping the seller to reduce it in 10 to 14 days with no activity max. If you're testing the market, don't test the market for 30 days or 45 days. Properties don't sell for more after 30 to 45 days. So you're going to go in with your target range, and what you'll find is your seller's always going to want to go at the top of the range. 9 out of 10 sellers will want to list at the top of the range. So if you tell your sellers the property is worth 450 to 500, and you really think that property is worth 450, I bet you that seller is going to list it for 500 because that everyone greedy. I can now buy that new car or I can go on that vacation with that extra $50,000. And they're going to say that 50,000 means a lot to me. So if your target price is 450, give them a range of 425, 450. And I bet you they'll list it at 450. It's an easy target. You want to lead your seller in. Don't let them lead you. So if you want to guide your seller to a specific price, give the range, but make sure that your top end of the range is really where you want to list it, not where, they're going to list it at a price that's over where you're thinking. So 450 to 500 valuation is going to get you a $500 listing, $500,000 listing. 425 to 450, you look more like an expert and you're going to get that 450 list price that you wanted all along. Oldest trick in the book. Next slide.
Y'all learned something that I didn't know. I didn't know he was doing that. I like that. I always hear the range because I'm there taking notes and creating all type of systems and checklists for the team, but I never knew that that's what you were doing. So okay, all right, got it. All right. So with that being said, one of the things that we don't want to forget, and this is good for agents, new agents. This is good in your preparation. This is also good when you get to the table. Now, of course, and Nick is going to speak on this. We don't want the customer pricing the property based on their net because that's just not what it is, right? You can't do that. That's not the purpose of presenting the seller net sheet to them. But at the same time, it is for the purpose of giving them an idea of what their potential net could look like based upon the different price ranges that you have presented to them. So, Nick, if you want to add to.
Absolutely. Do you know where the net sheet goes in your package? Anyone can answer that. But I'll tell you where the net sheet should go in your package. Everyone, if you come into the listing appointment, I've figured out your list price, here's your net sheet. Worst mistake you can make. What's that 6%? That's the first question they're gonna ask. They're gonna zone in on. What's that, what's that transaction fee of 7.95? You know, the net sheet is the close if needed. I let it wait till we get a contract. Only if the seller asks, all right, I agree on your list price. Let me see, just so I can, in my mind, do my numbers. Do not lead in with a net sheet. The net sheet's at the back of your listing presentation. You don't care about the net. Only the seller cares about the net. So why are you bringing the net sheet as a prevalent factor in this? You've already discussed your commission. You've discussed the buyer's agent commission. It's all been discussed. And you sign here on the listing agreement. I'm getting 7%. I'm going to compensate the buyer's agent. This is what it is. Don't, the title company will get into it once there's a contract, or you can provide it at the time of a contract. Don't lead in with a net sheet. It's a deal, it's a listing killer or room for doubt with many sellers. They're not sophisticated enough. They hear 6%, they know roundabout what the numbers are. Then they look at the other transfer taxes, expenses, taxes on the deed. They get a little overwhelmed, and it can kind of damper your happy listing appointment. So don't lead in with a net sheet. A net sheet is important to know how to calculate it. Go on the website. Purchase Ready has a net sheet calculator, so you can calculate that, but do not bring that. I see it at the front of a lot of listing presentations. That's, that doesn't, you're talking about the comps. You're talking about what you're going to do for them, your sales skills. Your sales skills are not to change the net or adjust the net. The expenses are the expenses. So next slide is building the deliverable. You're basically bringing in, three side-by-side comparisons so the seller can direct their immediate competition. You know what they're looking at. Provide the number, days on the market chart to set realistic expectations. Those are in a lot of those automated valuation models, and include neighborhood maps so the sellers physically can see. Remember, you want to keep your listing appointments clear and concise. So focus on the pages. If you've got a 25-page listing presentation, 90% of that is fluff. Focus on the 10% of where you're going to list the property. Everyone's already picked, what they're going to do for them. Here, I'm the expert. My valuation, in addition to everything else, we're going to set your property right. When are you going to be ready to move? Because my properties are going to sell. With our strategy, we're going to sell your property. Well, I have time to move. No, you don't. You're here asking me to list the property because you want to move. You're not here to list the property to sit and watch people come through your house. It's not very pleasant to have a bunch of people come in every week. We want to minimize the inconvenience. So you're basically holding this client accountable to the value and understanding how you came up with the value, the map. And if you're, if you're in an area that has one comp that the seller's keying in on, it's vacant or it's an easy show, take the seller to that property to help them devalue their property. Well, that house, it's sold. No, it's not. It's listed. It's listed for 900, and you're trying to list this property for 700. Take them to that $900,000 property, and build that into your listing appointment. That's why it's listed for 900, and that's also why it's sitting on the market for 90 days.
One of the last things I want you to comment on, with regards to bringing a clear and concise deliverable to the appointment. Speak on, you mentioned, like, for example, unfortunately, agents that brings the MLS printout, and how you mentioned, like, they don't know what that is, right? Like, you don't even know what that is. Like, so um just provide some clarity around how you keep the listing appointment just clear and succinct. What are just the three to maybe five pieces of information that the seller needs to focus in on, understand, and make a decision on at that time concerning the property?
Okay, I'll abbreviate those questions into one. Don't show, you have realtors that go to listing appointments or to their clients and they have an MLS sheet in hand or on their computer. Think about the first time you looked at an MLS sheet. Try and find days on market. Where is it? You're fumbling. You're looking. somewhere on the MLS sheet. It's all the way at the bottom, it's in the middle, it's at the top. Depending on the MLS system you're in, you're trying to find the square footage. And do you think the seller that you're talking to knows what an MLS sheet looks like and knows where to look? If you look at a printout of a one-page MLS sheet, it's a maze. You know it because you look at it. Typically, even if you know it, sometimes you have to take a few seconds to look to find where the data is. So unless you highlighted it, don't show it. Highlight three things on an MLS sheet. Obviously you'll have a square with the picture, the price, days on the market, and what it sold for. Don't show sellers a blank MLS sheet. It's the worst way. They'll never tell you they don't know what they're doing. If they're not saying, if they're nodding their head, they don't know what they're looking at. They're going, yes. I have no idea what I'm looking at. I have no idea what this MLS sheet is. It's the worst way to embarrass or try, not intentionally, but embarrass a seller because they don't know, or even a buyer. Don't show a buyer an MLS sheet just without highlighted portions of it. So the amateur agent works on emotions to win, does does work on emotions to win the listing. If you're a market leader, you're not the MLS sheet person. You operate on pure logic, adopting a technical appraiser's lens, as we call it. You don't guess on exact prices, by handing one MLS sheet and telling your seller, this is what we're going to list it at because this other property is right here. The expert never provides an exact number. It's a range. And you can disagree. I'm sure there are people who disagree. They like to provide an exact number. But remember, think about the boxing ring, the corner. Don't corner yourself in. You'll find that it works. It allows dialogue because they'll trust you. Hey, there's a range. All right, let's try the high end of the range. And that's the number you wanted. So you're going to win more pricing strategies on your listings with a range. Someone in our group is trying to list a property and they said that the seller wants to sell quickly. Give them that range and key in, on they might even go lower than what you want to list it at, and that can generate multiple offers. Don't be lazy and just use a 1 mile radius. It is focused on specific neighborhoods. We didn't really focus on the map function, but you can do grids of specific neighborhoods. Don't again just put words in like, Olympia or, Black Diamond or specific neighborhoods in certain areas or, wherever you are, Pembroke Pines, if you're selling in a subdivision, don't put the subdivision name because a lot of realtors call subdivisions the name, the actual name, and some realtors use the name that's in public records. And I've never heard of that subdivision, but it's actually what's in public records has a different name for that particular subdivision. And the amateur agent is going to treat the listing appointment as a guessing game, while if you're an expert, you treat the listing appointment as an evidence review, and you're going to go in with your closing argument and give them your laptop, where to sign digitally, or if you're old school, you're giving them the pen and paper on where to sign. So I think there was a question from someone.
No, just a
No.
comment. Um, so listen, we had the opportunity to corner Nick Jackson for an hour, who's normally have probably been at 5 different properties by now and made 6 different recommendations. But with that being said, I want to give you an opportunity, Nick, to close us out just with some closing thoughts. Of course, now I think that definitely the right, Della, the morning group has tied you down. We're going to see if the afternoon group can get you tied down as well to continue to join us. But I would love again for you to just provide some parting words, at least for this session, to the group. Truly, truly, because you are one line that I always use is that the expert was once an amateur. The expert was once an amateur. And I don't want anybody to become overwhelmed with the gap between your current state with where you aspire to be. Again, I do not embellish. I am probably underestimating, guys, the number of properties that Nick has sold over his 30 years and valued over his 30 years of being in the space. Again, he is not only one that values properties for other sellers, he's an investor himself. So he has to use these same skills to look at a property, determine what he's willing to make an offer on it for, because he knows what needs to be done to the property to put it back on the market. So with that, conversation overwhelmed. So with that being said, Nick, if you could just again just give us a quick exit for the group here to just really just guide them on how they can continue to become an expert in this space.
One of the key things I think that all of you have to take into this, many of you have great sales skills, you're great people, and sometimes that wins you the listing is your personality, your skill set. But ultimately, you don't want to have extended days on the market with the properties you list. Or if you have buyers who trust you, make sure you're showing them properties that aren't going to fall out with an appraisal and you've got an unreasonable seller that you're putting the property under contract with. So knowing your numbers and learning to know your numbers if you're new is an important part of real estate. And there are many models and classes to study it, but this is a simplified version of really how to treat the valuation and the numbers process very easily. So even your buyers, I know we're focusing on the listing lab, but your buyers are the same. You have to have a range. They want a property for, a specific price. They need to have a range, and your sellers need to be open to receiving offers in a range. So it translates into all aspects of the sales process. Everyone needs to have the range that they're willing. They can't say, my bottom line is this. This is the number I want. Nobody has an exact number. They do, but you have to diffuse that and become the expert on how to lead people in. If you don't lead them in, then you'll be cornered and they'll be stuck in their corner. You're going to have an impasse. Then you need the appraiser in the middle of the boxing ring to kind of diffuse that problem. But I think everyone here has great differences in how they market, how they sell a property. But this is also ammunition. Those of you have listings right now that are difficult to sell. This isn't only for your listing presentation. You've got properties on the market that are overpriced, that aren't selling. Maybe they're priced right. You haven't gone back in with the seller with a new presentation. You go back in and you basically flip the switch, put on a different outfit. You were wearing dull colors, go back in with bright colors and come in armed with a new, shock them in this new presentation. You're used to wearing earth tones, and now you go in with fuchsia, a color that, wow, well, what's the occasion? You wear jeans all the time, go in with a suit. You're going in for the interview to resell the listing that you've had difficulty selling. Just be different. You're basically changing your whole demeanor for this listing because the listing becomes stale, not just because of the listing, but because of you. You haven't changed your mindset and gotten the difficult seller to understand that now's the time for all of us to change our mindset and rethink it based on the valuation proposal. You go in like it's a new listing. I know in the morning lab we've talked about it, but you're going in for a new listing presentation on your existing listing. So I'm sure there's some of you here have properties you're getting ready to go to the market, relook at it again and make sure that you're on your key point, on your range, and that you have room to backpedal out of that corner, because every listing in this market can be a challenge if it's not priced. And people say, oh, it's the market, the war in Iran, things are happening, there are political issues, their interest rates are high. Properties have sold in the past when interest rates were 12 and 14%. Your parents bought properties at 12, 14, 17, whatever the rates were back then. So don't use the excuses. Keep your mindset that it comes down to valuation and your interpretation and how you get the seller to accept your valuation proposal and position. And they will become your best friend and they'll become your ally as opposed to your enemy. Valuation shouldn't be a battle. It should be that you've prepped them and then they realize the wife wants to list at a price, the husband wants to list at one price, but ultimately they'll come together on the same page because of how you've presented the valuation range. So you listed at the high end of the range for the wife, and the husband was more realistic, and he'll list at the bottom end of the range when you go for your representation in a couple weeks. Well, it's only been 2 weeks, 3 weeks, exactly. Properties don't sell for higher after 30 days. So that's how I think is a good close to leave it at that. And we'll revisit this in more specifics. And if anyone has any questions before I hand it over back over to Racole.
Well, I think we get it. Any additional questions before we close out? No? Going once, going twice, gone for today. But we do still have again our daily office hours from 10:30 to 11. It's a quick hit. Again, today it's an opportunity to come in and ask all of your questions, really concerning anything concerning your business. Like I said, we with this quarter being on the listing topics, we have had discussions on the pricing valuation. So the agents have brought in their properties that they are preparing to list or they have on market and need to have a second listing presentation to get some support around that from Nick and as well as the other realtors that are in the room. So again, feel free to your opportunity to get support does not end on Thursdays at 1. Again, you can pop in from 10:30 to 11 each day during the lab office hours because Nick has been there. Add the calendar if you don't have it to sync it with your calendar so you don't miss a call. Lastly, if you're not getting text messages about any of the meetings, be sure you can use this QR code or send a message. Lastly, the recordings are always on our YouTube channel by the Friday. Uh, this QR code takes you to our YouTube channel. You should subscribe so that you get the notification along with the email, and you should also receive a text message. All right. You're welcome, guys. Lastly, for those of you who've not had a chance to leave us a Google review on our new purchase ready page, we greatly appreciate it as we're building our new page, and we would enjoy that greatly. All right. All right. Where's our office? We have offices in our physical offices in Palm Beach off of Palm Beach Lakes and Village, and then in Orlando. Well, but our satellite offices are throughout Florida. So we conduct our closings throughout many of our satellite offices, but the team is located in main office in West Palm, and then we have Orlando location. All right. I'm glad you guys enjoyed it. Glad you guys enjoyed it. Again, we will see everyone in the morning or some of you next week, Thursday. All right. Good to see you, Maria.